Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, Michael, who's here personally right now. Welcome to the second meeting of the UB Financial Social Work Group. Again, if you don't know me, my name is Daniel Khan. I'm an MBA MSW. I'm graduating in the summer of 21. And Michael, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Michael Leff. I'm an alumni now of the MSW program, and I'm also an attorney.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so last week or a couple weeks ago, we went over some of the introductory concepts of financial social work, and I was hoping to kind of lay some groundwork for what the group is actually going to be and what everyone kind of wants out of the group. And so it seems like a lot of these interests span from applying personal finance principles and concepts toward micro advocacy and macro political change, you can say. And other people maybe just want to join the group because they want to have some personal finance advice for their own lives. Either way, I think this is going to be a valuable resource for people, among all the peers with different interests in corporate social responsibility and case management, etc. There's a lot to gain from this. And so there's a couple things today I wanted to go over. The first is I made a brief presentation from some of the workbook activities and guidance that I was going through in the certification process. And so I'll just kind of get into that first. But I have this really, I think, valuable tool that I learned about that's offered at UB, as well as throughout the entire SUNY system. So I'm also going to highlight that if you're not familiar with it, because it was actually very hard to find. But there actually is a resource that's online for financial advising for students. And I don't know if you, like Michael, for example, I don't know if it's accessible for alumni. You might just need to have a UB email or something, but we can figure that out. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So this is the 6/13 Saturday meeting. So this is just a few of the lessons I went over from the Financial Social Work Certification Workbook. And a lot of it is just screenshots I took and highlights that I had throughout the lessons, but I thought these were some of the most valuable insights. And of course, this is only a very small portion of some of the lessons and questions that were posed in the book. Michael, feel free to chime in if there's anything, if you have any questions or any comments throughout this whole thing. So the first section I wanted to talk about was about commitment and attitude. And so obviously I wanted to include, I usually like to keep my slides kind of concise, but for those who are watching, feel free to pause, take notes, or write down any of the answers to the questions that are in these slides. But essentially, in terms of our money, it's very easy for us to not only not want to think about our money, but to try to delegate all of our financial responsibilities to other people. You can see this with couples where maybe there's some standards where, like the husband, the wife, whatever, has a responsibility to handle the finances. And what Rita Wolfson was arguing throughout her workbook is that each of us individually has to take responsibility and to commit ourselves to our own personal finance, whether we're in a relationship or not. Just to have our individual responsibility and knowledge of our own finances is going to be extremely important, because unfortunately a lot of times you see, like with married couples, for example, if let's say one partner had the responsibility for the finances in the family, and all of a sudden they separate or they divorce, and the partner who was not responsible, quote unquote, with the money is left not knowing anything about their financial circumstances. And this is something that committing personally to your own money can help mitigate. And so just staying involved with your own finances and thinking about money more often is definitely a remedy for this. And so without that, with commitment, is this sense of financial passivity. as opposed to financial activity. And so what Rita wants to talk about, and especially with this whole component with attitude and relationship with money, it's not so much about the technicalities and the mechanics of money, but it's a lot about our own self-worth. And so our feelings and attitudes about ourselves have this strong correlation with what we do with our money. And I'll kind of go over some questions and some other insight I learned about our own self-worth and our own self-awareness and how that influences our financial passivity. And so there's an activity that I honestly was initially going to skip because I felt that it wasn't really going to be that useful. I thought it was kind of just not as practical. But this whole section about connecting to your childhood was actually very valuable. So for all of you watching right now, and for Michael who's here today, if you want to take a moment now, or after this meeting, to take a moment to reflect about how you feel about yourself and how that is linked to your childhood. And so this is all going to have to do with our behavior and our habits with money. And so think about some of the recent decisions you've made with your money recently, and what was happening in your life and what were you feeling at the time you made those decisions. So all of these decisions you made were based on some sort of need that you felt necessitated some action for you to take. And then, so for me, I'll be open with all of you. I have had issues with smoking weed. I'm just going to be honest. That's been a problem I've had for a while. And I know that that is based on some need that I have. And it all links to our childhood. And so knowing when and where you practice that behavior, for me, maybe it's like buying weed. I know that it comes from something in my childhood. And all of us have some sort of emptiness or void that we have in our lives. And with money being so integral to our lifestyles, you can often see that based on where you are spending money, especially if you're known to be a heavy spender, where you're putting your money and determining what need that's fulfilling is going to be very important in trying to heal from that emptiness and filling it with something more productive, especially for your finances and obviously for your self-worth. And so when you're talking about your childhood, think about your earliest memories of money. Who in your family talked about money? Specifically, who didn't talk about money? Who taught you lessons about money, if at all? And then how old were you when you first considered earning? Meaning, when did you want to first find a job? And or who or when did who told you that you were supposed to start earning for yourself? Like if your parents told you like you need to find a job, when was that? And then connecting that to now, how did you feel when you first started earning your own money? People sometimes got allowance. How did that make you feel when you started working at like a local farm when you were like 15 or something? How did that feel to be able to earn for yourself and not be as dependent on other people? And then what did you do with that money, and what were you expected to do with your money? And now going into the present day, after you reflected over those experiences in childhood and leading up to when you started earning money, how does the way you feel and think today about money differ from when you thought about it and felt about it when you were younger? And so these are all questions that the workbook had you actually physically write out. And and this is why, like, first of all, Michael, I'm really grateful that you're here because, I think I really appreciate when people are able to watch this video after it's recorded. But these are the kind of things and questions that I would love to be able to talk about in person with people if they felt comfortable. And whether or not that's in the context of the group or just in a personal conversation you want to schedule with me or with anyone else in the group, I think these are really important questions to really answer for yourself, and not just read. But if you are not connecting with us in person, I would encourage you to like actually write down the answers to these questions that are posed in this presentation. If you obviously you can pause the video whenever you want and do that. And so leading in, going from the attitude and the beliefs and behavior that we've kind of developed through our childhood that we take into today, it's a lot about just learning the basics of money. And again, going back to that commitment of taking responsibility for your own financial life and about the money that you earn, save, and spend. And so the three basics that are important things to know is how much you make, how much you spend, and how much you have. And that's basically, in other words, like your income, your expenditures, and kind of like your net worth, your assets that you have. And I would make the assumption that most people don't really make the time habitually to know these three things. And so going into habits and self-sabotage, these are some of the questions that are going to be also important questions to ask yourself, and again, to write down or even to say aloud. And talking about some of the behaviors that keep you stuck in one place. And these are all within the context of money, but they can expand beyond that. So these behaviors that keep you stuck, how do these times when you have these behaviors, how do they self-sabotage you? And what are the feelings, thoughts, or circumstances that facilitate these self-sabotaging behaviors? These are some examples, like when you're tired, when you're disappointed, when you're depressed. Why do you sabotage yourself? And this might take a little bit more introspection, but it could be obvious, like, just a habit is something you do daily, or it can be a little deeper. Again, connecting to your childhood, what are some things that you learned when you were a child that are influencing your self-sabotaging habits? And so with all this information that we're getting, it's extremely important that we act on it immediately and frequently. Because as this says, according to research, a lot of the information that we are getting, and there's so much information we are getting every single day, and our attention is another thing that's being fought for so often, but we have to be able to reinforce all this information into action and to have accountability, not only personally, but collectively, especially with this group. Hopefully this group itself is going to foster accountability for positive change in our lives. And so this is just a case example. And Michael, I hope if you want to participate, I'd love it. But I'm going to read this little case, and then there's a couple questions about it that maybe we can talk about briefly. So Jen loved her friend Amy. For as long as she could remember, they had a standing lunch and shopping day on the first and third Saturday of the month. Jen had explained to Amy that she was trying to become more money-wise and couldn't spend money for the lunches or on shopping. But Amy, her friend, was relentless in her efforts to keep Jen as her lunch and shopping partner. She told Jen how important it was to their friendship and how much it counted on her company and companionship. How could Jen say no? She owed it to her friend of so many years. Jen and Amy continued their Saturday tradition, and Jen found herself struggling to keep her commitment to become more money-wise. Now, this example might resonate with some people and might, look familiar to a lot of people. But some of the questions that we could ask, and Michael, if I could potentially ask you, how did Jen allow Amy to overstep her boundaries? What do you think Jen did to allow Amy to overstep her boundaries as her friend?
I think the idea that their friendship was predicated on this financial commitment, that they spend money somehow. Like there could have, and I mean, this will go to the future questions, I think, as well, but she allowed her to assume that, especially when she made it clear to Amy that she was trying to, be more financially sufficient and had, money troubles, that she allowed, Jen allowed Amy to continue to kind of pressure her into having a relationship that was based on that financial commitment.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, this is all about boundaries, and it seems
Right.
like there wasn't clear enough boundaries set between the two. And obviously, this is not exactly black and white because obviously there are two things about this is that Jen, it was really important that their friendship was based on these meetings that they had, but she couldn't really understand that. Oh, I'm sorry. Amy was really relentless in trying to continue these meetings and couldn't probably understand that there were boundaries that Jen really wanted in terms of how she spent.
Right.
And so, there's just priorities between the two that seem to be a little bit different. And so, what do you think? I guess these next two questions you can kind of combine. But what do you think that could have been done differently, and would you have done in a similar situation?
Yeah, I think in both cases, for both questions, I think what could have been done differently, what I would have done differently, is try and find an alternative um, activity that we could do together that wouldn't involve spending money. I think there are many things that you can do. I mean, invite someone over to your house and have coffee, and that doesn't cost anything really. A cup of coffee, not a big deal. You know, um, or take walks, go to a park together, or find activities that you can do that allow you to keep that friendship and that camaraderie without having to have a financial element to it. And I think that would have been what they should have done and what I would have, suggested.
Yeah, and the problem is it's their tradition, right?
Right.
So it's what they've always done, and so it sounds like Amy's interpretation of their tradition is that that's the way that they remain friends and they foster their companionship. As you said, there are so many other ways to start a new tradition
Right.
that doesn't involve spending money.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some examples of some financial boundaries that people can set, and these are all to begin with the phrase "I have a right to." So for example, I have a right to set financial boundaries. I have a right to be honest with myself about my financial circumstances. I have a right to take responsibility for my financial future. I have a right to avoid people who undermine my financial well-being. And I have a right to be a healthy financial role model for my children, family, and friends. And so I think by clarifying these, writing them down, reminding yourself of these every single day is going to be very crucial because having boundaries is what is a precursor to commitment. Without boundaries, it's really hard to make a long lasting commitment to change. And so these are only a few examples, but obviously this list is expansive and you can include whatever else you want. But one major way that I found was a strong behavior towards fostering this commitment to your financial future and to helping others with their financial circumstances is to have at least 1 hour per week with your money. And so some of the check marks that you see there are some examples of things to keep in mind when spending this hour with your money. And so it can be as simple as just writing down the things that you spent your money on that week. It doesn't even have to be a dollar amount, but just reflecting on like, okay, what did I buy this week? And it could be good or bad. You don't have to label it as much, but at least spend this hour just thinking about money and doing something active and proactive in terms of trying to help your financial circumstances. And I think that's the thing is you know, we may subconsciously realize that we're spending too much on one thing, or not investing our money in something else and thinking of all these opportunity costs around us. But to actually be able to look at your bank statements, for example, or to talk to a friend about money, like just do something that has to do with money 1 hour a week at least. Like for me, I just set up every Sunday at 10 a.m. That is where I at least have this dedicated time to think about my money and to go over how I spent my money that week. And we talk about budgeting. That's a major way that people can actually start to take financial control. But that can look like a lot of different things. Like I like Excel, so I use an Excel spreadsheet to write my expenses down. But you can write it down. You can make it as basic, as simple as you want, but just start and just set that time aside. And that's probably going to make a huge difference in the long term. But it doesn't, it takes actually doing it. And so by doing this, Ms. Wolfson says that doing that will be able to basically prove to yourself that you're willing to make this change in your behavior because you're actually doing something about it. And it basically gives you this space to be able to learn more about. I mean, honestly, you look at your credit card statements and see how you spent your money in a month, which like I talk about money a lot, but I'm guilty of not looking at my bank statements, which is one of the worst things. Like it's probably the easiest thing to do is just download the PDF of your bank statement or just open your mail when you get a statement in the mail and just look at it. But it's not an easy thing to get yourself to do that. But once you do, and not only do you see your behavior over the last month, but then going beyond that and actually calculating how much you spent on certain things, it is shocking. It may be shocking to you depending on, what kind of behaviors you have with money. But for me, it was very enlightening. And just to be able to look at it without even having to write down the budget is enough to sway and influence your behavior and hopefully a more proactive approach to taking a more proactive approach with your money. And so in terms of accountability, I want to, again, kind of going off of what we talked about for our intro meeting, how can we hold each other accountable and support each other in each of our individual and collective goals with what we want in this group? So whether that's, connecting people who are interested in like the corporate social responsibility, or whether that's talking about what we're doing, like what's the best way to budget for each of us individually, what books are we reading, and just talking more about money and holding each other accountable. Michael, do you have any thoughts on this for right now? Because obviously we can talk more about this in the chat, but does anything come to mind right now in terms of how we can support each other?
I think, to have open and honest conversations, to have our own boundaries. I think about how we share, what we want to share about our own personal, I guess, financial customs or habits, I guess would probably be the better word. And, just knowing that this is a safe space, I think, for us to talk about some of the things that are important to us with regards to financial social work and financial responsibility.
Yeah, no, I love that. And not to put you on the spot, but what does money mean to you, or at the very least, what does this group mean to you? We kind of talked about it before I started recording.
Right.
But what does money and or this group mean to you?
I don't know that I have an answer for what money means to me. As far as what this group means to me, I would say, I think, even just listening to this conversation, I think it's expanded a little bit, listening to your presentation. But, for me, I think I want to, as far as what this group means to me, I think being able to, as social workers, understand the issues better that our clients face with regards to money and financial responsibility. And I think the boundaries thing is very important because it's important for us as social workers to help facilitate and guide our clients, but not to be directive with our clients as far as their own finances, and maintain those boundaries. I think sometimes it's very easy for us to try and judge our clients, and how they spend money and what they're spending it on, but that's not our concern. What's our concern is trying to give them the tools to make their own decisions. And I think that that's very important to remember. And I think, on a more macro perspective, it's understanding the programs, that exist to help the people on the ground make those, you know, help guide those clients. And, our case managers doing a good enough job with this kind of a program? Should this kind of a training be given to every case manager? And probably, I would think that this is something that case managers should be really well versed in, because they're in many cases charged with helping clients budget. And if they are being too directive, the clients are going to, generally speaking, do exactly the opposite that they're being directed to. So I think it's important, it can have a counter effect. So I think it's important that the case managers understand, these tenets and, you know, ways of looking, perspectives of looking at money from that angle as a social worker. And I think it can also benefit, one another, as you said, personally. I think that all of us can probably have a greater, um, you know, inside, or introspective, into what our own, um, spending habits are, and how, be more introspective on what our spending habits are, and what, financial responsibility means to all of us. And so I think it's, um, yeah, I think it can be beneficial always.
Michael, that was wonderful. Yeah, obviously this group right now consists of these social workers. Obviously, we have overlap with like dual degrees and people who have different career and personal interests. But for social workers, something that I didn't include in this presentation that was talked about in the workbook is about permission, and giving ourselves permission to think about money, and not, going along with this commitment and boundaries thing that we're talking about. We talked about like demonizing money as a social worker, but and just because we are so focused on wanting to help people and adopt this altruistic approach to our work, that it's really, really easy for us to kind of neglect the money aspect. But when money controls so much of our lives, especially as you mentioned with case management with clients, if we aren't able to understand what money means to us and to give ourselves permission to secure our own financial lives, how are we supposed to do that for our clients? And so holding each other accountable and having those honest, exactly those words, these honest conversations about money is exactly what I also feel this group should be. And conversations, I'm glad to have this conversation with you, Michael. And my hope is that more of us, hopefully after even watching this recording, that you guys want to actually participate in these group discussions, because this is a safe space, but it's also what I've also heard called a brave space, where just having the courage to talk about money when not a lot of other social workers are willing to do that. And so, especially within your organization that you're working for, the company you work for, the institution that you're working with, or just in your family or friend group, be that person that is willing to start those conversations. And we are all going to be here for you to support that effort. Personally, I am willing, able, and happy to meet with all of you personally. I'm going to keep reminding you guys of this. I will meet with you personally, and if you want to just talk about money for a little bit, like I'm free all the time now this summer, so I would love to be able to have these conversations with you. But ideally, to have these group discussions together during our meetings is going to be very, very important. Like, this is not just for us personally, although I believe the information, insight, and conversations we have will promote our own personal development, but this is for our clients, for our family, our friends, and our peers. And so participating in these meetings is going to have an impact on the people around you. It's just being honest with yourself and then honest with all of us together. And so just because of all this adversity we've been facing lately, 2020 has been a challenging year for all of us in different ways. But I wanted to kind of end this specific presentation with this quote, in that in every crisis there is a message. Crises are nature's way of forcing change, breaking down old structures, shaking loose negative habits so that something new and better can take their place. That's from Susan Taylor. And so I just want to kind of give this reminder to people that, don't lose hope or give up faith in your ability to change your circumstances, whether that's financial or personal, just because we are facing this adversity right now. Because if you keep holding on to the belief and hope that things will get better with persistent effort, or that, at least if you try, there's some probability that you will be able to make your circumstances more positive, we'll be able to get through all this. And especially with each other's support, it's going to be a lot easier to secure our own financial lives and to be able to provide for our families and to keep providing service to our clients. So I just wanted to end with that, and then also lead into the resource that I was talking about earlier. So I was looking up, because we were talking about counseling services, financial counseling services at UB, and how that's kind of been something that's not really been present at UB. And, I was looking around, but I looked up this UB Financial Counseling, and I went to their website, and this is through financial aid. And I was just looking through here. There wasn't anything that was like a direct link to anything, but after searching through link after a link of all these advising, it's really hard to find some exact direct link to this, but I ended up stumbling across this thing called SUNY Smart Track, Empowered Financial Planning. And even going through here, it took a little bit to finally get to where I wanted to. But I found this link that is for high school students as well. But for prospective and current students, if you click this link, and I'll put this link in our chat as well, you'll see we have this list of, I don't know if this is all the SUNY schools, but for all these listed, we'll go to UB. You can create an account here, which I already did before. And it takes you to this portal where it leads you through these different courses, from the psychology of money, which I already completed, as well as the foundations of like budgeting and investing, offering guidance on your loans, talking about credit, spending, debt, and your future. And so I'll go into the psychology of money just because that's the one I already went through. But they have all these modules set up for students who want to actually learn about their money, and there are quizzes and assessments all throughout that kind of help you understand your own spending. And I consider myself at least adequately versed in money, but this was actually extremely helpful, because by the end of it, after going through these really short videos and easy to understand content questions, it provides you with the results of your money philosophy, which you can see that this is based on the results I had. You have these 4 different types of money philosophies that you have, and apparently I'm a pleaser. and it gives you the strengths, challenges, and some of the background on how you make decisions with your money, and then what you can actually work on depending on the type of money philosophy that you currently adopt. And what's cool is in terms of like your loans and your debt, it actually, I forgot where in this it does it, but it actually links to your student account. So there are some assessments and questionnaires that are in this that actually have your exact tuition amount that you pay each year, as well as how much you have in student loans that you've taken out. And it actually kind of helps you figure out like what you need to do to effectively pay it off over time. And I thought that was really, really cool. And although this is a very positive thing to find, and like I said, I'll definitely send this to you so you can all take advantage of it if you're able to. Again, I'm not sure if alumni are able to. You might be able to still do it with your UBID, but the fact that this hasn't been, I mean, at least to my knowledge, I've been trying to research this for several years already, and I have never heard of this before. So at the very least, I think this is something that our group can try to promote a little bit more, depending on if collectively we feel this is something useful. Again, I just kind of started going through the courses, but I can already tell that this is, at the bare minimum, something that can be helpful to a lot of students. And it's extremely accessible if you can just go on your computer and go through some of these assessments and courses. I think beyond that, we still need some like actual financial coaches at UB, and we can definitely work on that more. But I'm kind of curious what you all think about this smart track programming, and if over the next couple of weeks, if some or ideally all of you were able to at least sign in and make an account and just go over like one of the courses or some of the course just to kind of get a glimpse of what it's like. I really want to know what you all think of it, because I'm going to go through this too. And kind of going through, like if you have student loans, going through some of these calculators and the resources that help you manage them. Even if you already know a little bit about this stuff, I think it's going to be very helpful. But yeah, Michael, did you have any thoughts about this, or have you heard of this before?
No, I haven't. I mean, it looks interesting to me. I'll definitely check it out, assuming I'm able to create an account because now I'm an alumni. But yeah, no, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, let me know, Michael, if you are not able to sign in. But again, just like the financial social work stuff, if people aren't able to access it, or if they just prefer me to kind of distill information into presentations, I'd be happy to do that as well. But yeah, this is, I think the action item I'd like to encourage you all to do is first, please try to come to the next meeting. Like actually be here. And obviously, I don't know if this time works for everyone. It most likely doesn't work for everyone. So I'm amenable to different times. If that works, I can make another win to meet and see if maybe people's schedules have changed in some way. But the second action item I believe would be to try to access the SUNY Smart Track and go through some of the courses, and then this could be a topic of discussion for our next meeting in 2 weeks. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to cover today, essentially. But again, I am extremely grateful for all of you who, I mean, for the people who come to the meetings, who came to the intro, and for you, Michael, who came today, and for all of you who are watching the video. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And I genuinely want this to be useful to you. But reach out to me personally. I would love to talk to you for as long as you want. If you want to go over your personal finances or just share with me what you're doing in your work to try to implement some of this stuff, or what you hope to implement with this financial social work material, I would love to learn more about what you're doing, because maybe there's something that I can gain from that as well. But with that being said, Michael, do you have any closing thoughts or remarks before we end?
No, I thank you for hosting this and for doing all this work and preparing everything. And, I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you. And all right, guys, I'm going to end the recording, but take care and let me know what your thoughts are on the meeting.